A subdued hello and welcome to the MMQB podcast. I'm
Is that
Conor.
like
I'm
a
a Breer kid.
snowstorm? Is that like a
Well,
nod to a snowstorm or something?
we know what it is. It's like I'm trying to be somewhat courteous because normally I tape this from my home studio and it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how loud I yell. But now it's 8 o'clock in the morning in a hotel and I'm just cognizant of the world around me.
Yeah.
I'm sure that some people are sleeping in after the Eagles game. So I'm just trying to be a little bit courteous. This
Yeah.
would have been a big. That would have been a big wake up call. The traditional hello. That would have been. I don't know if anybody would
Have you
appreciate
ever
that.
done that? Like I have been in that situation before where I've been like recording something and I got like a bang on the wall.
Ooh,
It's a bad feeling when that happens.
yeah,
Like, because then it's like you keep going, but like even when you keep going, you're like nervous the whole time. That it's like,
yeah.
am I still being a dick? You know what I mean? Like even though I have like taken it down a couple notches, it's like becomes really hard to focus.
It's a weird thing, right? Because we're having a sleepover essentially with like 2,000 people at the same time. Or I don't know how many people are in a hotel at once, but like in a big playoff weekend and you're in a major city, there's a lot of people in a hotel. And so most of the time they're the ones keeping you up, when you get to bed at midnight and they're still getting back from the tailgate and they're carrying on and everybody's doing the chants and stuff in the hallway, which is cool. I have no problem with that. But then the flip side of that is you might have a room next to a podcast host in the morning, and you got to have to deal with that on the flip side. So
That's true.
it's gonna be a
It's
very mellow pod today. I can't
it's
scream as much.
always like touch and go when you're on the elevator with the guy with the guy with the 30 rack and like he hit and you hit the button for your floor and then he doesn't touch anything. You're like, oh, okay. So he's going to the
Hmm.
same floor as me. When you're on a work trip. I mean, when it's not a work trip, it's fine. When it's a work trip, it's a little different.
You're in a palatial Buffalo hotel, by the way, that looks
I
more like an
am. I
apartment. This
am.
is
I am.
ridiculous.
This is fantastic. So I'll give people, everybody on YouTube can look there. It's messy, but there's a
Wow.
conference table over there, my bag,
What do you got, a
some
Keurig over there too?
some running shoes. I don't know. That's not a Keurig. They don't have Keurigs in Marriott's for some reason. They have like something else that's sort of like a Keurig, you know?
Yeah,
Then
but
my
your coffee
bedroom's over
maker looks
there.
nicer than mine.
Yeah. So I'm a big Keurig guy. So I'm not sure how to work those. I've seen a million of them, but I'm not sure how to work them.
Well, as you guys know, it was playoff divisional round weekend, arguably the best weekend in sports. Albert was in Buffalo. I was in Philadelphia. And we'll get started here with the game that neither of us were at, but I think is actually the most important thing to talk about this weekend, which is the wholly stunning and completely mind-blowing upset of the Commanders
Hmm.
over the Lions. I'm still in disbelief when
Yeah.
I think about this. And, I think, looking back at it and, it's one of these games where when you talked about how the Commanders could beat the Lions, obviously the answer was, okay, get Jaden Daniels confident, get him some early completions. You're going to have to get a lot of yards after the catch. You're going to have to force turnovers. You're going to have to do all these things. It just never sounded feasible. It never sounded possible. And here we are talking about a 45-31 win to bring the Commanders to the NFC Championship game. I don't know. I'm
It's
I'm still trying to track it.
I think so. I mean, you start with the turnovers, right? Which are the ultimate equalizer in any football game. Was 5-0, I think, right? Was the turnover
Yeah.
margin.
Hmm.
So, like, I don't care who you are. It's going to be tough to win when it's a 5-0 turnover margin. I think the other thing is just the defensive injuries. You kind of had in the back of your head, like, eventually this is going to bite them, right? Like, it was the whole year, was just kind of like, I mean, Aleem McNeil was a massive loss. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson and, um, how is that going to look in a playoff setting when you have a team that has like, and you and I both know it's different in the playoffs, right? Like where you are just putting everything into that one week. You're holding nothing back. Like the amount of advanced work you're doing is amped up. The amount of game planning you're doing is amped up. It's just so I think a lot of times your holes get magnified. And I mean, can you believe that? Would you believe that we would be here in the middle of January and the injury to Amik Robinson might have been the one that did the Lions in?
Hmm.
Isn't that crazy?
And you could
Because
see
that
it.
was the one, because like that, and it wasn't that Amik Robinson is Patrick Surtain or Derek Stingley or anything like that, but it's like now it's like who are you putting on the field? And then
Right.
Brian Branch gets banged up again. And it's just kind of like, I think it became an accumulation of all of those things. It's like, okay, like what do you hang your hat on defense now? Because you've, ostensibly lost your best two pass rushers in Hutchinson and McNeil over the year. You have to win with coverage. And can you win with coverage anymore when you don't have those guys back there? It's sort of, it just felt like everything that they had dealt with on the defensive side kind of came home to roost all at once.
You could see it with the like the McLaurin touchdown, for example, right? It's
Yeah.
like this is normally a really physical secondary that tackles really well in space, and all of a sudden we're getting 30 or 40-yard gains on passes that are just right off the line of scrimmage. You know what I mean? And I thought that was one of those things where you divide it two ways. One, you have to give credit to Cliff Kingsbury because I thought, every single person in the world knew that he had to come into this game
Mhm.
finding easy completions for Jaden Daniels. That's easier said than done, right?
Yeah.
Every coordinator of a rookie quarterback is supposed to find easy completions for their guys at the beginning of games. Every coordinator, period, is supposed to find easy completions. He did, and he found them. There was a lot of yard after the catch possibilities. Maybe that was because how the Lions were playing defensively, whatever it was. All of a sudden you get a snowball rolling, and Jaden Daniels, I think when you get him in that spot where he feels confident, is just as good as any quarterback who's been playing in the league for 5, 6, 7 years.
It's crazy like how his heart rate doesn't seem to jump at all. Like it's just in the biggest moments how he's able to capitalize and um like a couple like the throw to Diami Brown and what they've been able to kind of make. I think that's the other story here is how they're maximizing everybody. You know what I mean? Like Diami Brown was like I think promising as a rookie a couple years ago, but it kind of fallen off the radar. They're able to get more out of him. Obviously, McLaurin's McLaurin. Um, Austin Eckler, makes some big plays where he hadn't. I think he'd been a little bit of a disappointment, right? Like based on kind of the role they envisioned for him. Brian Robinson plays a big role. They manage their issues in the offensive line. Uh, and then, like the defense isn't great, but like they're able to generate turnovers, and they have guys like Quan Martin, who's a second year safety, who's I think got a chance to be a good player with the pick six there in the first half. I think like just the poise in the biggest moments though, because I did feel after the Lions' second touchdown, where they went right down the field, and I don't know if you felt this way. It's like, okay, the Lions have hit the gas, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's over,
Mm-hmm.
and you could have very easily seen it there where it was 14-10, where that could have been like it felt like it could be 35-10 in a flash. You know what I mean? Like and Jaden Daniels comes in, drives them down the field, then they have the pick six, and now all of a sudden it's 24-14, and from there I feel like the Lions were just swimming upstream the whole afternoon. Even in the second half, right? Like the second half, like the Lions go on that big drive, and okay, that's what's going to turn it. And then the Commanders turn around and go on the 15-play drive. It's just they had an answer for everything, which for a team with a rookie head coach, a completely new staff, a rookie quarterback is like mind blowing. Like that they were able to play with that sort of poise in that environment against that team.
And you have some takeaways on up on SI.com from the weekend. I mean, what was your sort of major pull from this? Just in a chance to get to talk to everybody and to get a sense of what everyone was thinking after this, because this, I mean, like,
Yeah. Well, I asked Dan Quinn after the game, like, I said, what would you say if I had told you a year ago that you'd be here right now? And he said, boy, that boy, I hope so. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't think Dan Quinn and Adam Peters and all the guys that came in there were under any illusion that this was going to happen, a year ago. But I mean, look, like I think the cool thing is if you look at it, like so many of the guys they brought in, they had prior relationships with. You know what I mean? Like so, like they knew what they were getting, and I don't think any of us were sitting there last March and saying, "Wow, the Commanders killed it in free agency." You know what I mean? But like they go and they get Dorrance Armstrong and Tyler Biadasz from Dallas, who are key pieces for them now. And they were with Dan Quinn there. They bring Austin Eckler. Well, Anthony Lynn was with Austin Eckler, with the Chargers. They bring in, Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin. Scott Fitterer is there. He was with those guys with the Panthers. So, they go and they bring in all of these known commodities. You know what I mean? Like all of these guys who they had background on. And I think the key is like, like this guy may not be playing this position for us for the next 10 years, but we know exactly what we're trying to build and we know exactly what we're getting. And I mean, how many of those did they really screw up?
Right. I
I
mean,
mean, Zach Ertz and Cliff Kingsbury, right? Zach Ertz and Cliff Kingsbury were together in Arizona. Like almost every one of them was like a known commodity for them. So like you look at all of those guys and it's like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like they knew exactly what they were getting with each of these guys. They knew how it would fit together. And I think their hope was, I mean, I think like I remember saying this beginning of the year, I think Dan Quinn's hope was, I remember sitting down with him over the summer and talking about this. I think his hope was by the end of the year, they would be a pain in the ass to play against, right? Like that's it. Like just be a team that plays together and is a pain in the ass to play against. And on a much higher level than anybody expected, that's exactly what they were on Saturday night, right?
yeah. It took the Commanders, I just went back and I looked at it again just to make sure that I had it right. It took the Commanders more than 6 minutes in this game to even get Jaden Daniels touched by the Lions defense. And it took them more than 6 minutes to have to be forced into a passing play that took him more than like 2.5 or 3 steps to drop. I mean, that's ridiculous. And I do wonder, this is kind of a bigger picture question that we can extrapolate out of this. We come from a weekend in Philly, for example, like I'm down here, and this wasn't Kellen Moore's finest hour. And you look at someone like Cliff Kingsbury, who's postponing head coaching interviews until after the season. And he has requests in from the Saints and the Bears as of the taping of this. Does any of this change? I mean, I had been, at the beginning of the season, I kept saying, listen, if Jaden Daniels has a good year, Cliff Kingsbury's gone. And I do wonder if this weekend might have changed things for Cliff Kingsbury, just in the way
so first of all, like, I mean, good for Cliff, because I think perception of him was in not a good place, and it's funny because sometimes there's a divide between, but like from what's out there in the internet and what people are sort of telling me behind the scenes. And Cliff was one of the main ones, like of that would be in that category a couple of years ago, because what I kept hearing from defensive coaches was that is the hardest offense to play against. It's like playing Navy if you're a college coach, because they do things so differently and the rules are different and the way they're set up is different. And Cliff really has a good feel for that offense. And has a good feel for how he wants to call it, has a good feel for how to set you up. So that's a really hard offense to play against. And I think a lot of people like never got past the college-y thing with him. You know what I mean? Like that this is a college offense, or stuck him with like motion stats. You know what I mean? Like this can't be that innovative of an offense because they're not doing this, But they were doing things with like the receiver splits and the way that they were formationing people. They were doing things that other teams weren't doing, which made them really hard to play against, which is exactly what Dan Quinn wanted when he hired him. Was that offense was really hard to play against. I want that offense to be my offense. You know what I mean? And so, like, I think it's really interesting. Does it open the door for more guys at the college level, like to come in? Like, does Lincoln Riley get a look from somebody now? I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting thing to look at. And I think the thing for Cliff, I think, is that I think Cliff's done well enough with his money where I think he'd be okay. Like doesn't really need to work another day, I don't think. So I sort of look at Cliff and I think to myself, if you are a little disillusioned with how things went at the end of Arizona, you spend the 1 year at USC, and then you've gone to this place that's completely rejuvenated your love for coaching, and you're working with this kid who is special, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like who is going to be really good for a long time. Why would you leave right away?
Right.
Because I mean, here's the thing. I mean, I remember always talking to people like who worked with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and guys like that about this. Like, right, that guy protects you because that guy being there means you're probably not going to be running a bad offense for quite some time. You know what I mean? So I think that it gives you a little bit of protection there. I don't know. I mean, I would definitely take a hard look at Cliff if I was one of these teams, but if I'm Cliff, I'm in no rush to leave.
I would say the flip side to that, right, is like if you're someone like Bobby Slowick, right, who interviewed really well last year, and then
Yeah.
your quarterback hits that plateau, or you hit a plateau, creative
Yeah.
plateau, whatever it is. And we'll get to the Texans and the Chiefs in a second, but there is that sense that for some guys, you're going to get that second chance, and you're going to get that
Yeah.
second chance. For other guys, it's like you better grab on, or else
And
you're
that's
going to
Aaron
kind of
Glenn. Yeah, you have to
yeah.
strike while the iron's hot. Yeah.
Underdog is the best place to cash in on all your takes during the playoffs. Which players are going off and which ones are ice cold. With over 5 million happy players and $2 billion won, Underdog makes it fun and easy to cash in on all your favorite athletes' performances. With their Pick'em game, you could win up to 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on a player's stats, like yards, touchdowns, interceptions, and more. Underdog is the only pick'em platform that puts the power to cash out in your hands. Now you can either keep riding with your entry or tap the win now button to cash out whenever you want. Every dog deserves a second chance, and with Underdog Rescues, you can get your money back and receive a promo if an early injury causes your entry to lose. Now, I am not much of a pick'em expert, but a lot of my friends too, who are novices in this whole thing, say that Underdog is the best way to immediately get into the game. For example, this week, look at, hey, is Brock Bowers going to get higher or lower than 8 catches? Is Joe Mixon going to score more or less than 1 touchdown? These are great ways to get into the game, spice up the action a little bit, and make your weekend of watching football all the more enjoyable. And Underdog is the best place to play Pick'em. Download the app, sign up with promo code MMQB, and deposit now to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. That's promo code MMQB. You must be 18 years or older, 19 years or older in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 years or older in Colorado for some games, 21 years or older in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado for some games. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369.
I want to get back to the Commanders for a minute because, I feel like we've been talking about the Lions all year. But one thing that blew my mind about this team, right before halftime, when they have the Jameson Williams reverse touchdown and the Lions get within 3, to go back down the field and, Detroit's blitzing, Jaden Daniels is just like, he hits that deep ball to De'Ami Brown. It took me back to this moment in training camp where I watched them in a joint practice with the Jets, and Brown was running all these deep routes against Sauce Gardner over and over and over, and Jaden Daniels just kept throwing them, and he just kept trying them, and he just kept trying to make it work. And I just kept thinking, like, man, this guy gets it because he's not avoiding hard situations, even in the preseason, right? He's throwing difficult balls. He's throwing balls into traffic, but he's throwing catchable balls into traffic. And all of a sudden, here you are in the biggest moment of the season, and that's what it is. I mean, yes, this Lions defense is banged up, but you're just cutting right down the field again and just stomping out any sort of semblance of a comeback that they had. I mean, I thought that reverse was the game changer for Detroit, and it just turned out to be, kind of empty calories at that point,
Yeah, and I think how much of it, Connor, do you think is like the reps though he had in college? You know what I mean? Like the fact that he had 55 starts and the amount of things you've seen, and like knowing when you can take a chance and when you can't take a chance, you know what I mean? Like, and just the volume of experience that you have, like, I think informs you in those situations where it's like, I know when I got to cut my losses, and I know when when I have to take a chance, because he's played in different offenses. He played in different conferences in college. He played at Arizona State, where he was probably at a talent deficit in a lot of games. He played at LSU, where he probably had the talent advantage a lot of times. You know what I mean? Like, so I think he's just seen so many different things. He just, obviously watching him, you can see how ready he was for the pros, but I think you're on it. Like he doesn't play a conservative game. He knows when to take chances too.
For me, and I'm curious what you thought too. I think that the pick at before the half was the one Um, I think the pick before halftime was the backbreaker to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an incredible play. Goff obviously kind of left a little bit under the ball, and all of a sudden, the Commanders get the ball to start the second half, and that was the first time that I was maybe like, okay,
They could win this game. Yeah.
I can start to entertain this in some way, shape, or form.
You're talking about the Sanders still pick, right?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. Well, like Sanders still looks like another one that they really hit a home run on. Yeah, I mean, they made all these plays when they needed the most, and even like again, like in the second half, like I just like it. They get the stop. The Lions get the stop coming out of the half, and then they go right down the field, and for DQ, I think they went 15 plays. I think there were 2 converted fourth downs there. Like they kept taking chances. They put so much on their rookie quarterback. Hey, we trust you. Keep making plays. And he kept moving the chains and he kept the offense where it needed to be. And I mean, I don't know. We could sit here and talk for 3 hours about the direction Washington is headed in. It's really stunning. I mean, like you think about where they were like 2 years ago when you had the Dan Snyder yacht tracker and like
yeah. We've come a long way.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm down in Philly, and I'm sure Matt and Gilberto will get a little bit more into the preview earlier in the week, but
Yeah.
I'm down in Philly, and
I'm not so sure the Commanders don't win the game.
I know, like I'm just saying. And
I mean, I don't know. There's just something with the Eagles. I don't know. I feel like they can't fall behind, right?
or something, and we'll get to that in a second. I want to put a
Yeah.
bow on this real quick. I think what's mostly heartbreaking about Detroit is now you lose both of your coordinators, very
Yeah.
likely. Ben Johnson's not changing his mind and coming back now. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but I was checking in yesterday and did a little coaching carousel piece for this morning where I re-predicted. And I think Ben is the number one option in 3 different places right now. And
I think he might be. Yeah.
I think there's 3 different, and I'm talking about Chicago, Jacksonville, and Las Vegas. I think there are at least 2 owners who think that they have a chance to get him.
I mean, I think the Raiders definitely feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think the interview of Lance Newmark, who for people don't know, he's the assistant GM in Washington, but he was with Ben for 3 years in Detroit. I think that's a nice tell that they are that they feel good about where they're at with him. Jacksonville, I think if they're willing to make some moves in the front office, and I almost think that that's like sort of, don't you feel like that's sort of like a chess move, like the Lance Newmark thing? It's like, look what the Raiders are doing for me. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's like an element there of strategy where it's, I mean, if you want the Jacksonville job and you want to go work with Trevor Lawrence, the move might be like, hey, the Raiders are willing to give me my GM. And one thing that I think is important too, and this is interesting because, I said this a month and a half ago, and people were a little surprised, but I was able to kind of report out what Ben's top 2 priorities were, and interestingly enough, quarterback wasn't one of them. So number 1 was alignment with the general manager, right? And so whoever the GM is, he wants to have the proper alignment with the GM. And then number 2, he wanted an ownership group that's willing to admit its mistakes and fix them. And really, if you look at those 2 things, what is it? It's what he had in Detroit. And when he got to Detroit, the quarterback that he would wind up working with wasn't there yet, right? Jared Goff wasn't quite there. It wasn't there. I think he was traded for right before or right after Ben was hired. So yeah, I mean, like I think it'll be interesting to see, but I think that this is probably the point where Ben takes one. I think AG has to take one. He's in his 50s. He's a defensive coach. Things can be there's a backlog of good defensive coaches. Things can be so fickle on that side. And you're right, Connor. I mean, like this is what I wrote about this morning. It's kind of sad that this group didn't get that this group is presently constituted, the group that really put this whole thing together and created something that's so cool in Detroit, probably won't get to win one together. And I
Yeah.
think the lines are going to be good for. I think the lines window is wide the hell open. You know what I mean? Like I think the lines are going to be good for a long time, but it's too bad that that group doesn't get to experience it together.
I think you got to watch for Aaron Glenn in New Orleans and with the
Jets.
Jets in particular. I
Yep.
think that's the one where everybody's kind of putting the puzzle pieces together on that one. Good luck to him over there. It's a little bit different than Detroit, but
Sure is.
yeah, we'll see how that goes. But again, I mean, I would say Ben. If you had to power rank them right now, I would say the Raiders and the Jaguars, and also, I wouldn't count out the Bears.
I wouldn't count out the Bears
I wouldn't count
either.
out the
I
Bears.
mean, yeah, I wouldn't count out the Bears. I think all of it comes down to Ben's comfort level. And I think so much of it, again, like I would just reiterate that so much of it, I think, is based on his own experience in Detroit and what he saw work in Detroit, which was incredible synergy between the head coach and the general manager, and then an ownership that like really was, we are not going back down the road that failed us again. Like we are willing to look at new avenues. We are willing to fix what we did wrong. We are willing to look in the mirror. Like I think that's a huge part of it. And I think the people with the lines would tell you, like, it's funny. I heard this story. I may have told this here before, but like about Sheila Ford, where um, somebody told me like that the mother, Martha, like everybody thought it was going to go to the oldest son, William. And the story I heard was like she said to somebody, "Well, why would I give it to one of the boys? They keep screwing everything up anyway." So like we're gonna give it to Sheila and see what happens. And it turned out that worked out pretty well.
Worked out all right. Yeah. Now let's go over to the other NFC game. Um, I'm
You were
down
there.
here. I'm
Yeah.
here. I
In.
felt the full force of the Philly snow. Getting an Uber out of here last night was insane.
Oh, you
And
Ubered to the state. See,
so what I did was I got a hotel on the other side of the in New Jersey, because what I like to do is I like to park there. It's like a 15-minute ride to the stadium, and then I like to get back out there, and it's an easier out for me in the morning.
Yeah.
You don't have to fight,
Yep.
and it's like $30 cheaper a night, $40 cheaper a night, whatever it is. But getting an Uber,
it's like right over, it's like Cherry Hill or whatever, or maybe I
Yeah.
have my Jersey towns wrong.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them over there.
Yeah.
I got my favorite little spot here.
Keep
But
it to yourself.
oh yeah, I don't want anybody knowing about this. But I had to. There's all like the fake Ubers. They're the people that are just standing there and they're like, you got any cash on me or whatever.
Yeah.
And by the time I got someone to agree to take me, across the bridge in like horrible conditions, like the roads were just like slush. The guy was just like, "Do you have any extra cash? Because like this is not enough
To do
to
this.
do this."
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, "That's fair. That's fair." So I was like, I make sure I'll tip. But I was like, man, like I get it, like But it was So this was a game that.
So wait,
was,
did you watch the Buffalo Kansas City game in that Uber, or because I think that would have been the move?
So what I did was I did.
Because they have a nice press box in Philly too, or the setup's not bad
They have
there.
phenomenal prep. I've been like living here for the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's been amazing. So what I ended up doing was you come back out, you write a chunk of the column before you go down to the locker room.
Yeah.
You'd report out in the locker room. You come back up and you're writing it with the game on, and you
Yep.
see basically right up until the first half, and then with about a couple minutes to go before halftime, you finish with the column. You go down, you get the Uber, and then you make it back to the hotel for like
For the second half.
I ended up missing about 5 minutes in the third quarter, all told, which was it was critical, but you can go back and you can piece it together, through play-by-play and stuff like that. And I'll obviously watch it again today, but it really couldn't have worked out any better, But this was a game defined by the elements, and of course, Saquon Barkley just has 900 more rushing yards, so it's fine. Where
Yep.
it masks a lot of the mistakes here, and we send
By the
LA
way, like before we crush the Eagles, because I know that's probably where we're going. I had this like epiphany yesterday watching like in the Buffalo press box as if it was happening, and it's like with Saquon this year, it's almost like you can tell when he breaks the line that he's gone.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like right at the line of scrimmage, when he crosses the line of scrimmage, you can tell when he's gone.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they're not catching him. It's like some I kind of feel like maybe like Marshall Faulk was like that a little bit, like way back in the day, where you could tell just kind of like that by his pace and like kind of like how aggressive he was running. Like, oh my God, it's there for him. You know what I mean? He's gonna go. And I on both his touchdown runs yesterday, I felt like you could tell the minute he hit the line of scrimmage, he's out of here.
The second one in particular, and the 74-yard one, which I thought was going to put the ice on this game, and then all of a sudden we have to white knuckle a potential game-winning touchdown drive for the Rams. All of a sudden, and I was shocked, to be able to see how that came together. It was funny though. Saquon Barkley.
I didn't want to have to go all the way out west, which I was like kind of like. I am
Oh, I
going to
know.
Kansas City anyway, but I was like, God, I'm gonna have to go to LA, and yeah, so this one actually worked out okay.
Listen, at the outset of the playoffs, I had sold to my wife the idea of a potential, but unlikely world where I drive to Philadelphia for 3 straight weekends and I'm home basically,
And here you are.
and here we are. This is like the absolute dream scenario. Might take the kids next weekend and get a little place of the pool. We'll celebrate our good fortune, good playoff fortune, and then we'll roll into the Super Bowl. But I thought especially the second touchdown, Saquon wasn't even lined up on the right side. He said after the game he was supposed to be
is
on the
that
other
right?
side.
I missed that.
So, but I wonder if you get conditioned to have a confidence in your offensive line that allows you to play that free. And that's kind of what I was thinking, because in New York, we got to the point where, I remember thinking, okay, we might have just misunderstood him, almost like Trent Richardson out of Penn State, or out of Alabama, where when Saquon was at Penn State, like maybe the offense was just drawn up in a certain way that gave him more answers or whatever it was, because he did look lost for a long time.
I always felt like he was kind of like a home run hitter too. Like he and Zeke Elliott were sort of the same generation, and I remember like. You wouldn't see Saquon grind out like the 6, 7, 8 yard run the same way you would with Zeke. So that was sort of my skepticism with him. Like I felt like Jonathan Taylor was like, I remember thinking to myself, like, what's the difference between Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley? Because Jonathan Taylor's numbers were actually better and he was more consistent, and I thought like a little tougher. But now I think it's really easy to assign where the blame was.
For sure. I mean, it hasn't been the greatest of years for Joe Shane and John Mara and everybody else. And even though I will agree, and there's a radio host here, he's a producer for, I think, the afternoon show, Sean Marash, and he's a big Giants fan. And I think he tweeted something last night like, this team made the Super Bowl 24 months ago with Miles Sanders, so why are we making a big deal out of it? Which is funny. But the reason that we're making a big deal out of it is because he is the entirety of the offense right now. I mean, it reminds me of like some of these old Bears teams with like Matt Forte, where like, all the wide receivers are blocking and like everybody's just like contributing to moving the ball on the ground. I still, after last night, and you go and you watch Sirianni talk and you're talking to the players, why do we keep putting Jalen Hurts in these awful situations? His knees hurt. He was sacked out of field goal range, I think twice in the first half. In the second half, you deep drop him into his end zone and he gets a safety. This is after he's been in the medical tent. At the end of the game, you do a fake handoff on a third down and he gets sacked, and it's just like he's immobile at this point, at this juncture in the playoffs. I mean, enough so that we had to ask him after the game if he was even going to be able to make it for the following week. And so that game plan to me was just like, whew, like if you don't have Vic Fangio and if you don't have Saquon Barkley, you're not in the playoffs. A, and B. I mean, that's a 30-point loss.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know. I'm willing to give the defense a little bit of a mulligan, and Jalen Carter really bailed him out at the end. Like with the sack. I'm willing to give him a little bit of a mulligan because I always feel like in these snow situations, it's hard to throw the ball. It's also much harder to cover people than it is to run routes. You know what I mean? Like, so I do think like Stafford played great. I mean, Puka again, like just so clutch and tough and. Was such a huge part of it. Cooper Kupp, I thought, was good down the stretch. Like, So you give those guys credit, but I do think like the elements affected the defense more than the offense in that situation. When you're throwing it, I actually think in a lot of cases it's easier to throw it than it is to run it in those situations, just because of the way the footing affects everything. And so like I just don't know. I'm almost starting to feel like the Eagles have to play a specific type of game now to win, and they've been able to do it, but what happens if the Commanders do to them what they did to the Lions?
Right.
Where they're able to sort of start to turn the thing into a track meet.
I just wonder too, it's like, and we say this about the Chiefs too, and we'll get to them in a second, but you just, how do they keep doing this and how do they keep winning games like this? But it's different with the Eagles because we ask it, but there's no Patrick Mahomes on the other side. You know what I mean? There's nobody that's doing these phenomenal mind-bending throws that bail you out of the clutch situations. Bailing you out of the clutch situation is handing the ball off to the running back.
Yeah.
And, you win a lot of games. You win a ton of games if you're Philly, but it's wild to me, and that's kind of what I tried to capture. And I don't know if I did a good job last night. Great plug for my column on SI.com. But the idea that I was trying to capture here is like, we say this about a lot of teams where it's like, well, how can they keep doing this? How can they keep doing this? But Philly, I think the question is incredibly material to their success. It's like, how do they keep doing it? And how hasn't a team just come in and, devoted everything to just stopping the running back? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think like the Packers sort of drew the blueprint, right? Like where it's like, all right, we're going to cage rush Jalen. We're going to make him beat us from the pocket. And, we're going to put the brakes on Saquon. Now, it's easier said than done. Can the Commanders do it?
Right. Like, I don't think the Commanders are equipped to do it.
Yeah.
But here we go, like doubting this team that just blew the F out of the
just
Detroit
went into
Lions.
Detroit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to doubt the Commanders after what they did on Saturday. It does feel like all things should be on the table now, right? Like, and I don't know, man. Like, Philly in the Super Bowl would be entertaining, but God, like the idea of like a rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl
would be so fun. Well, it would be fun. It would be fun if he continues to be Jaden Daniels.
And I think he will.
It would not be fun if he turns into a rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And we'll see what would happen if, the Chiefs or Bills are on the other side. But I mean, the idea of like a rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl is unbelievable.
And here we are. Let's move over to the AFC. What was your main takeaway here? We have a Chiefs team that's just, they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be in the final. It was 23-14 over the Texans. Yeah. How many straight years are they hosting the AFC title game now?
So they didn't last year.
Oh, they
broke the streak. That broke the streak, but it's 6 of 7 have been at Arrowhead.
But they've been in the last 7.
7 in a row. And 6 of 7 at Arrowhead. So they're one short of the Patriots record, which is interesting because the last one of the Patriots streak was the first one of the Chiefs streak. So either the Patriots or the Chiefs have been in every AFC championship game going back to 2010.
Let me
and I think that there's some wild Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes stat where you can go back like 25 years. And it's like they're accounted for in a certain amount of them. I think maybe you might have to throw Ben in there to get it, but it's like something like that.
If I told you that your starting quarterback was going to throw for 177 yards, have a quarterback rating under 100, get sacked 3 times, your leading rusher was going to have 44 yards, and your leading receiver has 117, but looks like quite possibly the slowest skill position player in the playoffs right now. God bless Travis Kelce. I love him. But, and you're facing a capable offense with a decent quarterback. It's just like in a really
they know how to
defense.
Win. That's
and
the thing.
They
know how to win. I mean, like I think about like Spagnuolo's defense, right? And how many smart guys he has on that defense. And it's Justin Reed and it's Nick Bolton and it's Chris Jones. And you have like this the amount of free rushers they got when they really needed it, Right? Like how many times were they in a critical third down, fourth down, and all of a sudden there's Justin Reed or Nick Bolton coming free at CJ Stroud. You know what I mean? Like when they really needed it. They've been able to manage their corner situation, which, is really bad. They get Jalen Watson back. Now that feels like it might be coming together a little bit. I mean, you even got like a little bit of a glimpse of like the Hollywood Brown thing. Now he didn't catch that ball early in the game, but
Hmm.
you see like, okay, like that's what they were waiting for. So I don't know. I still have such a hard time. Like this, that they're the Patriots. I said this all year. They're the Patriots. I'm gonna have a hard time picking against them.
I know. I and I'm not saying this
I
now.
mean, and I could see Buffalo going in there and blowing their doors off too, by the way. But like, I don't know. It's hard it's like you just see it enough times, and it's like, yeah, of course they're gonna win. Of course they're still here. Of course, this is the seventh year in a row they're still standing. And um, the crazy thing is, I think that they would tell you that they still haven't played their best.
The Chiefs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I don't
I
think that's
mean,
crazy at all. I think everyone would agree that, like, I mean, and granted, right, it's part and parcel with you have injuries, you have certain
mhm.
limitations, or and also this is the world you've kind of chosen to live in free agency also.
Yep.
But so yeah, I mean, I think that there's probably a hard ceiling on this, but the fact that you've become this team and maybe you're not winning in an aesthetically pleasing way, but I think there is something to be said about the way that they're winning. But I think we could all, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see a 50 burger at
Well,
some point. I think we all would.
yeah, but I just think it's like it's again, it's just like every critical play. It's like Patrick Mahomes keeping his knee off the ground and throwing it to Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce, even though he can't really run anymore, like is so savvy that he caught that ball standing still in the end zone. You know how hard that is in the NFL to like
Hmm.
be open up where you're standing still, catching a ball in the end zone in those sorts of tight quarters. Again, I talked to a couple of their coaches last night, and it's Nick Bolton like coming free because he picked the right gap. It's George Karlaftis being matched up on a tight end because Justin Reed occupied the tackle, on a blitz. It's all these little things that happen at the biggest moments. I just think like when you've been in that amount of big situations that many times, you just you understand how to rise to the occasion, and they do it over and over and over again. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. It's really hard for me not to say they're going to win the whole. They're not going to win the whole thing.
sure. And I think too what it is like the wondery of it all, like the spectacular part of it all is the unsexiness where it's like you need a massive play to blow someone out of field goal range, and then like Charles Omenihu, all of a
Yeah,
sudden okey doke Shaq Mason and just gets into
yeah,
the backfield and destroys CJ Stroud. The defense on that play was fantastic. By the way, Stroud was dead in the water from the second he
yeah.
took that ball. But and then you have your kicker miss the field goal, and then all of a sudden you go down and Travis Kelce has a 40-yard catch, and these are the little moments that lead to big
Somehow
moments.
he's so wide ass open that like even though he can't run like he used to, like he's still chewing up 20 yards after the catch. It's like Kareem Hunt, like who looks like he runs about half the speed he did his first time in Kansas City, churning out that fourth down. I mean, like there's just something to be said for that. There's something to be said for it's Joe Tooney moving out to left tackle and like stabilizing a position that was a real problem for them early in the year. They have answers for everything.
It's like watching old men play pickup like Adam Sandler playing pickup basketball. Like it's not good, but he knows
Is there
he
going to be
knows.
Chiefs if they win next week? Is there going to be Chiefs backlash in New Orleans?
Oh yeah, it's already started.
You think so? Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, but with the penalties and stuff, yeah.
100%. But this team, I think what was interesting is like, I got probably a little carried away. I got pretty upset writing about the Mahomes slide and I was more upset about baiting the defender like
The
eight
one on the
plays later
sideline, right?
on the
The one on the side,
sideline
yeah.
because I thought that was kind of flippant
I think that was kind of BS doing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too. But I was saying, and I do believe all this. I think we should ban early slide or late slides.
It should be an unsportsmanlike penalty.
Yeah, I think an early slide should be an unsportsmanlike. I think we should normalize officials picking up roughing the passer flags because they can pick them up, but they just for some reason don't. I think we should make roughing the passer reviewable in some way, shape, or form. I know it's hard.
That's a lawyer's ruin everything thing. Like
100%.
They're never gonna. There's some lawyer in New York telling them like, whatever you do, like any sort of violent act on the field, if there's a penalty, leave the flag on the ground. If there's a fine, make sure it's at the maximum amount. Like there's some lawyer in New York whispering in Roger and Troy and whoever else's ear not to go backwards on any of that stuff, which sucks because I don't think it's in the spirit of fairness, but it is what it is.
But the last part of it too is I think that what Mahomes has done, and I know I got myself into trouble complaining about this earlier in the season when he did it. I think the baiting on the sideline should be considered a personal foul. I mean, in one of those where it's like, if you do it again, I'm throwing you out of the game. Because if you think about it in a bigger picture, let's say someone cleans Mahomes' clock right there on the sideline. What immediately happens? It's a brawl. Everybody starts fighting. Everybody starts shoving. Everybody starts pushing each other. You got guys without helmets on, guys with helmets. Like that is a charged environment. It's a dangerous play, just like the early slide is. And it has no place. But, one of these days, someone's going to make them pay for it, And, I don't know.
I mean, they have to find a way to deal with it because it's so unfair to the defensive player who he already has to think about the fact that like this could cost
so bad. Yeah.
I mean, it's not just the 15 yards either. It's like this could cost me 12 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what has to go through his head. And that sucks. You know what I mean? Because the guy who's on the other end of that is already making, 30 times what he is. And like now he's got to worry about money coming out of his pocket because the league is protecting a certain type of player differently than everybody else. And I understand that part of it too. I mean, look, the NFL is a business and you have to, they have to protect their quarterbacks. Like I like 100% understand and get it. But there's also an element of fairness, I think has been just stomped on, as a result of tightening penalties and making things a certain. I mean, I think like honestly, like, all right, so this is a bigger picture discussion for another podcast, but I actually think it's part of like the the relative lack of parity we've had the last few years. What is it? 6 repeat division champions, and it's 6 repeat division champions, and all 8 division champions made the playoffs last year. And then you look at like the final 4 teams, Washington, which we've talked about a lot, is a surprise, but the other 3 certainly aren't. And if Washington had lost, it would have been 4 teams that were basically chalk coming into the year, right? Making it to this round. And I think one reason why is because, and again, like we can maybe flesh this out somewhere in the offseason a little bit more, but I just think it's like the rules have become so slanted to protect the quarterbacks and promote the passing game that it's grown the advantage. I mean, great quarterback always gives you a big advantage, but it's just grown the advantage of having one to a disproportionate level. Where now, if you have one, you are so far ahead of the game. You know what I mean? Like that. It's just again, like that's a bigger conversation, but I think it's something the league should look at because I do think it is affecting parity in the NFL, which is something that does affect their bottom line.
Where do you go from here if you're the Texans? What do you do? I mean, obviously,
you have to grow the offense. You have to grow the offense, number one.
Yep.
Number two, I think you have to take a hard look at the offensive line because I think that's an area that you've invested a lot between, obviously Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard and Shaq Mason. You have to move Howard inside. Now you got a rookie playing at right tackle. I mean, they have not gotten the return on investment in that area. Everywhere else, they're kind of okay, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a,
it's a really good team. I mean, I don't know. I I come out of this thinking like I'm still super optimistic about the Texans.
I think that it's one of those years that maybe had to happen where, there's probably coaches and players alike that had to realize that there is no ascending
I
elevator
agree.
tract in this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think that we were all waiting for version 2.0 of Bobby Slowick's offense, and it never came. The
Yeah.
adjustments to the scheme
It
that he brought from San Francisco.
mhm.
And same with Stroud. I mean, Stroud's got to pick it
I
up
mean,
too.
I will say this, like early in the year, I really like Bobby as a coach. I think he's got a bright future. I think he's going to be a head coach. But like, there was a point earlier in the year where I had another coach that beat them. I talked to a coach that beat them, and he was like, I hope that they go back and look at what we did to them
Hmm.
because like there are a lot of things that I think they carried over from last year that the league's caught up to, and you sort of have to learn that it's a big cat and mouse game, and you have to stay ahead of it. And so, I think it's on the Texans to now play that cat and mouse game. And, I think D'Amico will look in the mirror and force his staff to look in the mirror. And I think there's a lot of growing they have to do. But I just look at the core there, right? So you have Tunsil at left tackle, you have Stroud, you have Nico Collins, you have Tank Dell. We'll see if Diggs is back. I mean, Joe Mixon. And then on defense, I mean, between the two edge rushers, Anderson and Hunter, and the two corners, Stingley and Lassiter, the future looks incredibly bright. I know Hunter's older, but I mean, I'm I'd be really excited about the future if I was Houston coming out of that one, and they hung in there on Saturday too. I mean, it's Kansas City. It is what it is.
Last but certainly not least, and this is what we do. It's like Netflix style. You save the best game
Yeah.
for the end instead of leading with it. Buffalo and Baltimore. I'm still kind of in awe of this one, and I think in some way, shape, or form, it worked out because we cannot. Lamar Jackson had some bad plays. Let me choose my words carefully here.
Yep.
But it wasn't one of those games where you walked away saying that the moment was too big for him and he looked
No.
incapable and that Buffalo totally dismantled him with their game plan. Buffalo had a nice day defensively, even though the yardage stats were high. I mean, this is one of those things that just came down to like this heartbreaking moment, and you feel good about both of the quarterbacks. You feel good about where both of the teams are generally. It's just like,
I mean,
this is
I
what
was sick.
happens.
I was sick to my stomach for
How could you not
Mark
be?
Matthews at the end, Andrews at the end of the game. I mean,
How could you
God,
not be?
I mean, he's such a great pro and has been such a great player, and he has the fumble earlier in the game, and for that to hit him in the stomach, and he's so open too, it just sucks, But I'm with you. Like I almost think more of Lamar coming out of this one. What
Hmm.
he did on that last drive, the throw to Wallace, where I have no idea how he even saw him, based on where he was in the field, they're hard against the sideline, and Wallace was kind of coming across the middle. Yeah, he makes the throw likely. I like there's this rap on Lamar that I think was fair a couple of years ago, and a rap on the Ravens that I think was fair a couple of years ago that they couldn't play from behind. And I think they dispelled that in this game. I think, in a high leverage situation, they kept swinging. And it wasn't that they couldn't play from behind that they didn't win this game. It was that the ball bounced the wrong way at the very end. And um, so I come out of the game like I think thinking, I mean, I think the Ravens did absolutely everything they could, and it was just not their day, in a number of different ways. The turnovers obviously killed them, and losing the turnover battle 3-0 was a big deal. And I give Sean McDermott a lot of credit. He actually, so I was with him after the game, and he said that his defensive coaches, he said he's only done this himself once, and he's never seen his staff do this before. They looked at every snap the Ravens offense played this year.
You could tell.
Every single snap the Ravens offense played this year.
Hmm.
And it was because and one of the main reasons why was because and he said they locked themselves away. They were doing it took them forever to do it. But it's like one of the reasons why was because of the beatdown they took in September, at the end of September, where it's 35-10, I think, right? And it was like, we need to figure out what we're doing here. And we need to figure out a better way to stop Derrick Henry. And we need to figure out how to make them play the game on our terms. And, one of the things that I think, look, there was some luck involved in the turnovers, but they felt like with all So the Ravens offense is complex for the defense to look at, but it's relatively simple for the offensive players. The thing is, there's a lot of like ball handling that goes into it. You know what I mean? And they felt like in the conditions there could be some opportunities, and and I think they sort of prepped their players. Hey, like the ball could wind up on the ground a couple times, and just be ready for it. And when it mattered most, they were there for that. You know what I mean? Like Von Miller and Damar Hamlin combining for that one. Terrell Bernard made just a phenomenal defensive play to punch the ball out and then be there to pick it up himself. And then Taylor Rapp tracking the ball there early in the game. Like the turnovers really made the difference for Buffalo. And it's again a great credit to a lot of people there that Josh Allen like played pretty well, but wasn't Superman in this game, and they were still able to grind a win out.
What's interesting too is you can tell, and again, I mean, I think there's some people who watch this game and say, "What are you talking about? Baltimore almost won this game at the end, and they drove down the field, and yada yada yada." But if you look at it, like a lot of the big plays, I mean, like anything with Lamar Jackson, right? It's like it's after everything breaks down. It's after he
Yeah.
buys time. It's after what you were doing initially worked and forced
Yep.
him to have to do something else, right? And I do think that there's something to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's and like again, I think there was that chess match element to it, where uh I mean, they sort of made Lamar play left-handed, a lot of Lamar's rushing yards were scramble yards, right? They got a couple stops on Derrick Henry in short yardage, which was, I mean, that's really difficult. You know what I mean? To
Mm-hmm.
stop Derrick Henry in short yardage. In fact, like a couple of those spots where the Ravens had to go to the sneaks, and moving Mark Andrews under center. So, like, I really think the Bills did a good job of forcing the Ravens out of their comfort zone, and the Ravens, to their credit, I think adjusted pretty well to it.
I love to. I mean, another thing that I thought that they did really well. Damar Hamlin was a big part of this too. Is early in the game, and Derrick
Hmm.
Henry's always going to get going. He's always going to warm up. But just to have someone like Hamlin in the backfield and you get a body on Derrick Henry the second that he gets the ball,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And so I think his first three carries were 1 yard, -1 yard, -1 yard,
yeah,
right? And in that time, and even though the Ravens scored on that drive anyway, he dropped that big Lamar Jackson pass where he was wide open and he would have
yeah,
scored on that, right?
yeah.
And I do think that there was something to the fact that maybe again, and they get rattled a little bit in a big playoff spot. And it's like, yes, I mean they collected, they regrouped, and they got back at the end. But this is a game where every single
Yeah.
little thing in the margins matter, and so all these little plays are significant. And again, I thought this
Yeah,
is one of
Buffalo didn't
McDermott's
really
best
screw
games.
much up, did they?
No,
Like
no.
they played like all the way around a pretty tight game. The run game was effective. I mean, man, James Cook like just keeps getting better and better too, doesn't he? Like he I don't know. Like I just it's an impressive complete, like a pretty complete team for a team that doesn't have a ton of superstars anymore. It's a pretty complete team.
It was, I was blown away. Again, I mean, I thought, and it's hard because Sean McDermott, when you're a coach like Sean McDermott, you've put yourself in a position where you're kind of put up on the tee a lot, and
Yeah.
you're based on how things have happened in the past. And, I don't know what would have happened if the Ravens tied this game and you decided to kick the field goal and now all of a sudden it goes into overtime. I was for kicking the field goal at that point. I don't,
Yep.
I don't care, Albert, what your, what's the name of your fourth down model? What the Albert Breer fourth down projection
I don't
model? I
know
don't.
the Breer paradigm. I don't know.
It's like I don't give a flying shit about it. Like, and I do think like like it's just like in those situations, it's such a gut call, and I think that in that moment, whatever it is, the field conditions, like all of it goes into it. I mean,
Yeah.
I was standing outside in Philadelphia and I had my hands out to call an Uber and I almost got frostbite.
I was, yeah, I mean,
It's-
I was out on the field before the game and then went back out there after the game. And, you know, I think people who aren't from northern parts of the country don't really understand. Like you hear a lot of people who are, I hate to pick on people from the South, but you hear people in the South say like, well, it was 25 degrees here like last week. You know what I mean? Well,
Not
yeah,
the same thing.
it's not the same thing as like 10 degrees and 5 below wind chill and you're standing out there for 3 hours. It's
Hmm.
not the same as like walking to your car at 25 degrees.
No,
Not even close. You know
no.
what I mean? Like, so I do think that, and I have my radar up for that because I do. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for having to practice in it and having to live in it, and
Hmm.
I think that I really felt like walking the field before the game. Like I just kind of like, and you see the way that people are kind of carrying themselves out there. It's like Buffalo's got an advantage here, and I think that played out.
What do you do? I mean, if you're, well, two questions here. Um, John Harbaugh, do you just imagine procedurally, like, because I think he might be coming to a decision point in his contract. Do you think the Ravens just at some point are just like, yep, everything's good here. Let's keep going.
I
I
don't
mean,
know. I just think he's such a perfect fit for that
I do
place.
too. I do
I
too.
mean,
And
I
yeah, don't, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like I see what you're saying, and if I'm another team, I'm definitely calling to see. Um, but he's such a good fit for like who they are and what they've always been. And I don't know, Connor. I mean, I see what you're saying, and again, like if I'm another team, I would 100% make that phone call because why not? You know what I mean? Like it's the same reason you call on Tomlin, you call on Harbaugh. Like maybe it's run its course. Um, I just don't know who you even replace. I don't even know how you go about like replacing him. You know what I mean? Like and what he's meant to that place and what he's built. I don't know. I mean, I'd be good with I mean, if I'm the Ravens, I'd do what I need to do to keep him. I mean, I don't know. I feel pretty strongly about that. Like now if you lose Todd Monken, that's going to be a blow. Maybe he gets the Bears job, we'll see. Um but like I think just as far as where you are at the top of the staff, he's so effectively managed so many things, and now it looks like they've got another. I mean, they've turned over the defensive coordinator job 3 times now in the last 4 years, right?
Mhm.
Or it's so going from going from Wink to Mike McDonald, then Mike McDonald to Zach Orr, then going from early in Lamar's career, Marty Mornwig to Greg Roman to Todd Monken. It's like he's gotten so many of these things right. I don't know why you wouldn't have trust that he would continue to evolve it. You know what I mean? The way that he needs to evolve it.
I would say one thing as I put a bow on this, for I don't think that anybody out there, who knows, the internet's a weird place. But
Sure
Mark,
is.
I I just divided 32 by 7, Albert, and I don't know if you know why I did that, but Mark Andrews has been playing in the NFL for 7 seasons. He's only had 32 drops. That's 4.5 drops a season. He had 3 drops of
Oh,
only 3 drops this year going into this game. Like it
just sick for
happens.
him. It's just
It
sick for
happens.
him.
It
I mean,
happens.
it's like who was the Cowboys player that dropped the ball in the middle
Jackie
against?
Smith.
Yeah, the guy be the sixth man in America. Like I kind of felt that way for Mark Andrews yesterday.
And it was one of those deals too where, I thought it was a good move by Harbaugh. And, I'm glad I didn't see anybody pushing back on it yesterday where he didn't talk after the game. I think it might be a while before we hear from Mark. And good. Like, you don't have to do
We don't need
this.
to. We
Like,
don't. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like
It's all good.
you don't need to explain what happened to me. Like I'm good. Like I've made a
I'll
lot of
move on.
mistakes in my life.
I'll move on with my day.
I've made a lot of mistakes in my life.
Yeah.
It's fine, and I'm sure
I've
we
done
all have
worse.
too.
I've done worse things than drop the ball in the AFC divisional playoff.
That's right. Well, as we come to an end, I bid Albert adieu. He's flying down to the national championship
Go
game.
Bucks.
I,
Where are you
I
watching it?
I'm gonna watch it at home. I'm gonna watch it with my daughter, my son, and my wife. I'm very excited about it. However, I just read, and by the time many of you listen to this, I might be in great elation or total complete heartbreak as Albert's alma mater destroys us. Pete Thamel talked to I think a dozen scouts and coaches ahead of the game for ESPN, and I love Pete.
Pete's the man.
Pete is our North Star for young Syracuse journalists, and so I always follow Pete and I read Pete all the time.
Pete was like kind of my neighbor in Boston for a bunch of years. I love Pete. He's the best.
Nice. And the consensus from all the scouts was if Ohio State even plays a mediocre game in which they don't turn over the ball, they're going to win by 3 touchdowns.
See, don't say these things. It's like bothers me. Oh.
And that and one NFL coach to Thamel compared Notre Dame to like almost like Butler, where it's like we're on this magical run.
I told you. I think I said this to you though. Like, what I can't get out of my head is like this looks so much like a Jim Tressel team. It's like because that's Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman was a captain for Jim Tressel, and I've watched that style of football for 10 years. And I know it's capable of beating more talented teams. I saw it against Miami when we won the national title in 02. Like that Miami team was like an NFL team. And it's hard for me because I subscribe to that style of football that they play.
Don't try to walk back my reverse jinx. I've already put it out there. I mean, it's obvious that Ohio State's going to win by 3 touchdowns and failing to do so would.
Can I hang up on the podcast here? Is that
right? Have fun down there. I hope everyone enjoyed their divisional weekend. If anyone would like some great follow-up content, join me as I try to traverse 95 North right now in what should be ice skates. And
I'm going to. I got an hour drive in the over the tundra of Western New York to Rochester for my flight to Atlanta coming up here, so that should be interesting too.
Yeah, well, let's fingers crossed we're all here next week doing the podcast.
I really need Delta to come through for me too. Let's go Delta.
All right, let's go Delta. Let's go New Jersey Department of Transportation. Let's hope that the salt is out on the roads. And thank you guys. As always, this has been such a fun season. We got 3 games left, and let's do it.